Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Croccast podcast. I'm your host, Nate, along with my co-host, Matt.
Hey.
And today we have on, yet again, Mrs. Marisa Tellez. Marisa, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
So, when we had you on last time, we kind of did a bit of an oopsie and forgot your, main thing, which was your research with crocodilian parasitology. So, you want to get started on that then?
Yeah, sure. Of course. Yeah. I mean, if anything, I have to say thank you to the parasites. I feel like if I had an Oscar right now, right? Like you say your thank you.
That's why Will Smith doesn't walk up.
I mean, it is because of my interest in parasites and wanting to pursue parasitology and crocs. I felt it kind of got my name out pretty quickly within the crocodile world, just because nobody was doing it. I mean, people would find parasites and it's like, we found a parasite in the lungs of an alligator, but no one had really dived into the evolutionary and ecological interaction between crocodilians and their parasites. And that's what was fascinating me and what really got me into wanting to study this. Is in the early 2000s, there was the research that came out about, at that point, crocodilians having the strongest innate immune system in the world. So the strongest first line of defense in regards of your immune system. And they did get demoted. I think it was like maybe a decade later when someone looked at Komodo dragons, and Komodo dragons have the strongest innate immune system in the world. Then you got crocodilians. But anyways, so one thing that I had learned during a parasitology class that I took in college was in regards of this evolutionary race or co-evolutionary race between parasites and various other animals. And in my head, I thought, well, is it because of parasites that have led, that in a sense kind of led or maybe help to create such a strong innate immune system? Because in the world of parasites, they want to survive in their host. And so they're obviously taking from their host. They're taking nutrients or whatever it is, but they don't necessarily want to kill the host, because if they kill the host, then they die. But at the same time, it's a loss to the host to have these parasites. And so that you have this co-evolutionary race, the Red Queen hypothesis, and in a sense, like the host will increase its immune system to rid of parasites, but then the parasites evolve a stronger resistance or maybe some type of camouflage per se, where they're able to attract various parts of a host immune system. So they're disguising as they're part of the body. And then the host finds that out, so it's this back and forth. So I kind of thought, well, again, going back to what I originally said, is it possible that crocodilians have now the second strongest innate immune system in the world because of their parasites? So that's kind of what got me really into parasites. And again, open to the world of crocodilians, and got my name out, because I think it was like within a couple of years, I was parasite girl.
Yeah.
In the croc world.
Yeah. So
what a great nickname to have.
Oh, absolutely. I have a couple of colleagues that they call me Parasite, and when other people hear that, I'm like, hi guys, and people are like, they're calling you a parasite. I'm like, no, it's because that's my expertise. Like, it's fine. It's a positive thing.
Yeah, so parasites really are trying to play the game of goose laid and golden egg, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your research with parasites, have you found anything unusual about any particular parasites?
So yeah, I need, if there's any young students or young scientists out there that are looking for a graduate project, I have quite a few that involve parasites. And so during my PhD, I went out to Louisiana and Florida during the harvest of alligators to collect samples of parasites in lungs and as well as the gastrointestinal tract. And one thing I noticed or I observed right away was that the parasites in stomach. So we constantly hear that crocodilians have the strongest stomach acid in the world, or one of the strongest, that it can break down any parts of prey. Anything that a crocodilian eats, it can pretty much dissolve it or ingest it because of their stomach acid. I don't think it's just because of their stomach acid. I actually think it's because of their stomach nematodes. So nematodes are worms, you know, like think of the worms in the stomach. And when crocodilians, or what I saw with the alligators, the American alligators, is that when the American alligator consumed something, the parasites would come out of the stomach mucosa, or like the stomach lining of the alligator, and start consuming the prey. And one thing that I noticed is that they have, in a sense, this type of venom, and this quote unquote venom of the stomach nematodes in American alligators, it was dissolving lead cases, like lead bullet cases.
Oh.
You can see it making holes in cartilage and bone. And this is when I just had this epiphany, just like my mind blew. And I'm like, it's not just the stomach acid that's why crocodilians can digest so much different parts of prey, or in a sense, a whole prey. It has to do with their stomach nematodes. And so the only way to, in a sense, to kind of prove this particular hypothesis is, and that's why I'm saying this is a great graduate student project for anyone out there, is that you can have some American alligators like 4 to 6 feet and make sure that they don't have any stomach nematodes. And then you have another group where they have the stomach nematodes, provide them the same type of prey, and see the rate of digestion. And that way you can actually be able to determine if it truly is just the stomach acid. But again, just even from what I saw from freshly sacrificed alligators, it's definitely not just the stomach acid. It is because of the nematodes that they can digest so much different prey. I mean, I actually kept the lead bullet cases. They're preserved at an office at UC Santa Barbara right now. And with some of the holes, I took out the nematodes, and the others, I fixed the nematodes in the hole, but you can see the perfect holes that they made from in a sense, the quote unquote venom that they release when they're digesting the prey.
Okay, so I have 2 questions off of that.
Yeah.
One, is that is the nematode, the relationship between the nematodes and the alligators, is that mutualistic, or that's a mutualistic relationship?
So yeah, so that's the other thing, is like, now through my studies, these creatures that we would say parasites, and yeah, I mean, they are parasites, they're taking from their crocodilian hosts. I really want to say they're commensals or mutualists now, from what I've observed. Absolutely, because it is, we are kind of seeing this sometimes a mutual benefit between the parasite and the crocodilian. So this is my favorite chapter in my PhD, is where I compared the bioaccumulation of heavy metals between parasites and the alligator. And this goes back to studies saying like, oh, we gave alligators all these lead casings, or, we exposed alligators or crocodilians to all these different heavy metals, and they don't seem to get high levels of toxicity. It is because of their parasites. The parasites are accumulating and, in a sense, metabolizing out the heavy metals that the alligators are being exposed to, keeping the host healthy, because if the host is healthy, that means the host continues living, which also means the parasite continues to live and is able to do what it wants to do, which is just reproduce. And so the parasite is really the sink of heavy metal exposure within crocodilians. And so at that point, it's kind of a mutual benefit. And it's a really interesting relationship that has evolved over millions of years.
So with that heavy metal metabolism, once the parasites metabolize that heavy metals, do you know how they get finally fully flushed out of the crocodilian system, or?
The heavy metals, you mean?
Yeah.
So the parasites, and so this is still, they might have been able to figure this out by now. But like a couple of years ago, there was a lab or one particular professor that was really looking at how parasites, in a sense, accumulate heavy metals. And this is just parasites in general. Like he looks more at the fish and domestic animals. And so they were really trying to look at the physiology in regards of how parasites are able to consume, in a sense, survive, but then like somehow their body is able to break up the chemical bondage within the the chemical bondage of the heavy metal. So in a sense, when it's like metabolized out, it's no longer a negative organic per se, but it's still very much like research is still going into that. So I don't have a concrete answer for you.
When you check the rate of digestion, are you flushing their stomachs? Or are you having to do necropsies, or is there a way you can sonogram it? Like
it's through the necropsies that I was looking at the rate of digestion. And I remember there was this one like 9 to 10 foot male alligator. He was huge. Everything, just by looking at him, looking at muscle, looking at the girth and everything would say that this was a very, very healthy male. Up to his death. And then you open him up, and I mean, he had, I think it was like 3,000 stomach nematodes. Oh, but wow. And like this again, you just see they're helping in the digestion of the prey. And then in his intestines, he had flatworms, also known as trematodes, as well as some nematodes. I mean, he is riddled with parasites, but completely healthy. And I noticed this across all the alligators. And so compared to another animal, I mean, crocodilians really do have a lot of parasites, but they have evolved, which I think one of the reasons why they're able to sustain so much parasites and any other animal would absolutely cause death. I think, again, it's because they've developed this commensal or mutualistic relationship with the parasites.
Is there like is something you're looking into, like a healthy amount of like nematodes? Because I assume if you have too many nematodes, like it's going to take most of the nutritional content away. You're not just like they're not going to get the nutritional content. Is that something you're going to look into? Is like an acceptable amount of nematodes in
that is a great question and project. Would you like to lead that?
I would love to. That would be awesome.
Yeah, after you get back from grad school in Queensland.
Yes.
I'm at a point, and it's funny, like so many of us, like, right, we get into the wildlife research or crocodile research doing one thing, but like now, especially with the CRC, and it's just like everything's so broad. Like I do have some parasite students, but now it's, instead of me necessarily being the hands-on investigator, now I'm more of like a mentor per se. Like I'll help initiate the projects and just kind of like help along, because I have crazy out of the box ideas in regards of various projects, especially with parasites. And even if I continued to focus solely on parasitology, there's nowhere I could do all the projects I want in my lifetime. And so that's why I'm always looking for students, whether it's undergrad or graduate students, even postdoc students, to like, of course, if they're interested, to pursue some of these particular projects, because I think it is really interesting, and it also helps us to understand the immunology and physiology as well as the evolution of crocodilians. And those answers can really help us kind of start having hypotheses or predictions in how, more human disturbance, especially pollution, as well as climate change, how that can affect the populations of crocodilians.
Yeah, so kind of dovetailing off of that, my last interview I had talking to a guy who did, I can't remember the professor he helped out, but they found that in Costa Rica with American crocs that they'll be getting into tilapia farms, and the tilapia being treated with testosterone to grow bigger, and that's actually messing up the sex ratios of the local crocodilian population.
Was it Chris Murray?
Yeah. Yeah, I interviewed one of his helpers who runs a specialty reptile shop up here in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that was kind of interesting, but that was kind of a side note. But
Wait, that's in Costa Rica, you said?
yeah,
That's are tilapia native in Costa Rica? Because I know they're invasive here in Florida. Are they native in
I think
Costa
they're an
Rica?
African fish, right?
I don't think they're native in Costa Rica. They're not native. I know they're not native here, in Belize. And luckily they've been contained. There's been some tilapia catching in some rivers, but it's still not a huge issue of tilapia like escaping farms or anything.
Florida, we just had a big invasive species roundup. I won 3rd place for the heaviest fish caught. Just a little brag, but you can continue. Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, Florida. I mean, at what point in Florida are you just gonna say, all right, it's just native now? Like,
right?
Yeah. So, but tying back to Matt's question about how many parasites is too many parasites, a few months ago you kind of lost a little crocodile, potentially due to parasites. You want to go over that?
Yeah, I mean, that was, oh my God, little Ricky Bobby. I was so excited to have Ricky Bobby as one of our crocodile ambassadors at Crocodile Research Coalition. The reason why I called him Ricky Bobby was when we went to go pick him up, the woman said one of the crocs, because there was 2 crocs and 2 baby crocs. She said one of them is deformed and sick. And she sent a video, but it wasn't really clear. And I was like, okay, it looks like it has scoliosis. And then we picked it up, and I mean, it was bad. Like, it was just very much an S shape. And then even you can see in the fingers, if you've ever seen any animal with metabolic bone disease, like it's just
swelling
are all over the place. I mean, and I was just like, sweet baby Jesus, and it just took me back to Talladega Nights. And I was speaking with Luis Sigler from Dallas World Aquarium. He is he's my Theo, my uncle in the croc world. He's one of the first guys I go to. He has so much experience in just everything croc. And so I was thinking, since he's still very young, because I know that there's been some treatment for even kids that have scoliosis, there's a way to maybe not completely straighten up, but just help not create such an S shape for to alleviate any type of pain or any other discomfort as they grow. So I was thinking, I'm like, well, this looks like about a yearling. Is there a possible way that we can try to stretch little Ricky Bobby just to kind of not help with the scoliosis, maybe not completely fix it, but just help him out a little bit and start giving him the right diet as well? Because the other croc that the lady had, now they found them in the wild, and the thing is that they were kind of stuck in this mud pond. And so, because there was construction in the area, and then they noticed that these 2 little baby crocs were stuck. The other one was perfect, healthy, just a normal yearling. And so that's why I was like, we kept going back and forth. Were these pets? But if they were pets, why isn't the other one illustrating metabolic bone disease? And so that's when we're like, okay, this is maybe Ricky Bobby was just born deformed. We were just trying to figure things out. So we had Ricky Bobby for about a month, doing all the procedures in regards of, massage and trying to help out the scoliosis and stuff like that. And unfortunately, I remember we went to go respond to a crocodile call because people were feeding a particular crocodile in an area, and the hotel was starting to get freaked out because they knew that could cause an attack. And so we went to go respond to the situation. And when we came back, Ricky Bobby was floating, and I was like, no, I was so sad. I was so sad. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I did something wrong. What did I do? What did I do? And the next day when we did the necropsy, that's when I realized he didn't have a lot of time left. And I did notice he basked a lot. And so basking reptiles, crocodilians, when you see them basking a lot, it is because they are trying to fight off some type of pathogen, parasite, bacteria, virus. They're sick. So they're basking to get all the heat of the sun to help rev up that immune system to fight off the pathogen. So I did notice that about him. And that's when again, that's when I was like, well, maybe he was a pet, and he's just trying to get all the vitamin D that maybe someone wasn't giving him. It was just a constant back and forth of like, what was the past of this animal? So when we opened up Ricky Bobby, and we have 1 or 2 videos on our YouTube channel, just the parasites that were in the lungs. And so he had 4 or 5 of these parasites known as pentastomids. So they're actually a parasitic crustacean. That is the only true, this is what I say, is that it is the only true parasite of crocodilians, because it has caused epidemic mortalities at various farms. What this parasite does is that it eats away at the lungs of the crocodilian. And so it just slowly suffocates the animal. And then also we noticed that there was 2 teeny stomach nematodes. But this Ricky's Bobby's death was not caused by the stomach nematodes. It was definitely caused by these very large parasites that honestly were pretty much taking over his lungs. And so that's when I realized this Ricky Bobby, didn't die because of something that we did or whatever. He was already dying when we found him, because it was just these parasites. But then as I started talking to some vets, and again, Louis Sigler, I was like, you know what? Ricky Bobby likely was exposed to these parasites at a young age, and parasites take nutrients. And so the nutrients that Ricky Bobby needed to grow healthy was going towards the parasites, thus causing the symptoms of MBD. So I've spoken with a couple of vets, and they I never thought about that, like parasites causing metabolic bone disease. And so this is my team and I were in the process of identifying the pentastomids right now, but we are going to present our findings at the next IUCN Crocodile Specialist Group working meeting that is in early July. And then we'll of course publish a paper. But it's a pretty unique case in regards of, again, the parasites causing metabolic bone disease and thus causing the death of a young crocodile.
So with that sort of parasite, you mentioned that before, that it can have detrimental effects for like farming and stuff like that. Is there any known treatment options for it, or is it's still an uncurable disease?
It's pentastomids, especially because they're in the lungs. There is no treatment for pentastomids. You can identify an infection by looking at fecal matter of crocodilians, which can be pretty difficult to get a good sample, to look at the eggs, to look at the eggs of the pentastomid. But at this point, there's no treatment for pentastomids. And so, I've seen adult alligators and crocodiles, when I've done necropsies, they'll have a couple of pentastomids. A couple of pentastomids is not going to do anything, but it's just, that is the parasite that once it reaches threshold, it's going to cause the death of the animal. And the animal starts suffocating. It's not going to be the easiest death for that animal.
It's basically alligator TB.
Yeah.
Are they getting most of these parasites from the fish that they're eating?
Yes. So this particular parasite, the life cycle is semi-known, but it is going to be coming from fish. But it is possible that the alligators, so Ricky Bobby likely got the pentastomids from eating little fish. But it is possible that they can also get it from eating turtles, because turtles can also get this pentastomid as well as snakes. And so if they consume a turtle or a snake that already has the adult pentastomid, that pentastomid possibly might not be digested because they have a really thick cuticle, and they can somehow burrow through the stomach mucosa, get into the circulatory system of an alligator or crocodile, and then find itself back in the lungs, and then it it can infect a new host.
So,
And then something else that's super crazy is I had a student years ago. She started noticing that all the pentastomids that she was finding in the lungs of alligators were all female because they are dioecious. So you have a male and a female. And then there was a couple of alligators where you would find the pentastomids in the throats or the esophagus, and those were male. And so we started thinking about it. We're like, I wonder if females are the true parasites in the lungs. And it's possible because you do see this in other parasite species.
Kind of like mosquitoes.
Yes, yes. And so the males might, in a sense, follow some type of chemical cue of the female pentastomid that's in the lungs. And it's the male is free living and then enters inside the alligator's mouth and then finds its way into the lungs, mates with the female, and then, let's say dies, or maybe it crawls out again. We don't know. Again, this is just a hypothesis that we had. And then when we conducted the necropsy on Ricky Bobby, all of the parasites in the lungs, only female.
Wow. So there's no, these pentatomids, there's no hermaphrodite in it at all. It's
no.
Wow.
Strictly female. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Huh.
maybe that's the way to cure it. Find a way to kill the males in the bloodstream.
That could definitely be like one way if the males get into the bloodstream. But yeah, there's still studies that need to look into the life cycle of it. And again, it's just a hypothesis. Great graduate student project. You went out there.
For sure.
So we've gone over stomach worms, and we've gone over what basically lung mosquito crabs, more or less. But is there any other unique parasites you found over the years?
So I now also have a theory, and I'm not saying it happens all the time, not all the time, but I do think it's possible that parasites can cause or increase the rate of cannibalism in crocodilians. And so a study came out in 2016-ish that a lot of cannibalism that we see in animals, and this is also, they looked at humans, especially these particular cultures that actually would consume humans for whatever reason. And cannibalism was, not in a sense a big part of the culture, but it was part of the culture. Yeah. These people or these animals are infected by a particular trematode or flatworm that infects the brain or the spinal cord. So again, there's just been studies and studies and studies, and that if this particular worm, and it could be various species or like a particular family or genre, but if they get a particular part of the brain, it causes something where you're more likely to cannibalize, or an animal will, or it's like not a big deal if it does, right? And so, because there is like that kind of, and there's been some discussion where, why don't animals predate on the same species? They're conspecific. So there's something evolutionary in the brain that's like, oh, no, a lion per se. I mean, I do know lions will predate, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like overall, it's like, oh, can't do that. Yeah.
So, no, I was gonna say, so I have 3 questions off of that.
Yeah, go for it.
The first 2 are, do alligators have prefrontal cortex, and are those parasites affecting the prefrontal cortex?
They do. However, there has not been a study to actually look at the parasites infecting the brain. Okay.
Because I know a lot of like mad cow disease and a lot of stuff like that, it affects the prefrontal cortex. So I was wondering if that, the other thing, it's kind of a a question along with like a story, but someone was telling me, someone told me at one point that, well, so there's a type of salamander. I don't remember what type. They have those Vorman teeth, and if there's not a lot of food, they will cannibalize. And those Vorman teeth grow larger. They eat them and stuff, and they apparently grow faster and much stronger if they cannibalize. But they don't do it because they get like ostracized by other salamanders, and so they can't get any like, I don't know how social salamanders are, but apparently they like, yeah, because it's behavior you typically see in like a social animal. Like it can't get benefits from the social aspect of the animal, so it doesn't do it. Anyways, I don't know if that relates at all to, I know alligators are more social than most salamanders, at least. So
yeah, and crocodiles, and we know that they do predate in the wild because there might not be a lot of food. You know, there was a territorial dispute and someone died, and you know, hey, it's free food. Why not? Like it does happen, but now the question is part of that also, is that button pushed a little bit more because there might be parasites in the brain? And the reason I say this is, we did publish a small research note in Herpetological Review a few years ago about the high rate of cannibalism that we saw in this one population in Belize. So it's a pretty isolated population. I mean, the amount of habitat they have is huge. So it's not like you have hundreds of crocodiles in this little space. I mean, there is plenty of space. There's more space for crocodiles here. So, and good habitat, very good habitat. And one night we headed out for our nocturnal eye shine survey or capture survey of crocodiles in this area. No one had done a study for almost 15, 16 years at this point. And we saw a very large crocodile, and someone was like, oh, it has something in its mouth. You know, I'm just thinking, I mean, it's any of the small mammals in Chickabull Forest. And next thing you realize, we're like, oh my gosh, that's a crocodile. And as we got closer, the large animal let it go. And we were able to salvage a good chunk of the corpse. And like, just estimation, it was about 5 foot. It was a female. We're like, oh my God, that's so interesting. An hour later, going further down the river, another large crocodile. It also has a crocodile in its mouth. We get closer, it lets go. And again, get the corpse, about a 5 foot female. We go out the next night, same area, likely one of the same larger crocs, definitely a different corpse, about a 5 foot female. And we're like, what the hell is going on here? And this is an area that there's tons of rangers. We've got the army, sometimes the British Army goes in there. This was not, you can tell, this is not due to poachers. This is not due to illegal hunting of the crocodiles. And it was about May or June, which is breeding season for the more or less crocodile. So we started kind of like hypothesizing that it was because some of the crocs we could tell were a good like 9 to 10 feet, and that's usually a male. Females don't get that big, but you know, maybe an 8 foot more or less crocodile in the wild here in Belize. And so, you know, as we were talking, and then I remember I messaged Graham Webb in Australia, because obviously they see a lot of cannibalism with the Australian crocs or Indo-Pacific crocs over there. And I talked to a couple of other people, and like just talking with them, I came to the conclusion that it's possible in this particular area, because, you know, the females will fight for good nesting habitat. And a 5 foot female, that is a young female. So we likely had some type of serial killing female that was taking out the smaller females, and then you had the big boys coming in to consume. And I mean, it is possible one of the crocs that we saw was the female that killed one of these animals. And so the reason how this connects to the parasites is I had also noticed on the river, as we were, you know, going down the river, you had a lot of fish coming up to the surface and then swimming on their backs or having this erratic swimming behavior. And I knew from my previous studies at UC Santa Barbara, that is caused by a trematode parasite, because the fish are, making a lot of splashing and whatever, and whether the final host is a bird or a crocodile, that attracts the predator to come in and consume, and that helps with the life cycle of the parasite. And usually that particular parasite will infect the brain or the spinal cord of a fish. And I had asked the rangers, I was like, have you guys noticed possibly in the last couple of years a lot of the fish swimming erratically? They're like, oh yeah, we have noticed an increase about that. And I was like, and didn't you say last year you also saw cannibalism of the crocs here? And they're like, yeah. And then you could see one of them was thinking about it. They're like, as we started to see more of the fish acting weird, we have seen more of these like half-killed crocodiles. And I was like, bing, 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 bing. This might be because of a parasite infecting the brain and causing the cannibalism. So,
do you have any theories as to why it would cause cannibalism? Like obviously it's affecting the brain, but why? I guess to consume. Why?
I mean, in regards of a parasite, they just want to make sure that their reproductive cycle can continue. So whatever they can do to make an intermediate host more attractive to be able to like predate on the by a crocodile, but then that parasite infecting the crocodile, I mean, in a sense, that could also just be the trematodes are hermaphrodites, but they also want to be able to, they can self-fertilize, some of them, but of course they also want to have some type of cross-fertilization. So if you can start getting some more trematodes around, that's even better for genetics and evolution. So I'm not saying like, the parasites are scheming all this, but this is just kind of like based on the dogma in parasitology when it comes to like, why are parasites doing this? Why are they causing the cannibalism? And then there was something about humans. Oh, this article was so fascinating when it started about cannibalism in animals, including humans. But there was, and I really can't remember it. I'd have to find this article again, but there was a discussion why cannibalism within humans benefited the parasites. I'll have to look that up. It was fascinating. It was really, and then again, it was like within a year, it was just serendipitous. So it was just a year later, here I'm in Chickasaw Forest and seeing all this cannibalism and, speaking with rangers that have seen it as well. And then you have the fish swimming on the surface. And it was just like, oh my God, this could be, the high rate of cannibalism that we're seeing. It could be because of parasites, And again, it is also taking in the knowledge that crocodilians, they do consume just as a source of food, a smaller crocodile, but it, part of the time it could be because of a parasite.
Yeah, with those fish, especially, it almost sounds like those parasites are acting like how toxoplasmosis acts with cats and their prey.
Yes. Toxo is such a fascinating parasite. And I was, you guys know Frank Robb, who Frank Robb is? He's the guy that caught Chance in Chicago.
Oh, yeah. I reached out to him about getting him on the podcast here soon.
Yeah. So he has a podcast now, and I went on his, and we got completely sidetracked of crocodilians and everything. And I started talking about toxoplasmosis. And one thing I remember he found fascinating was, for humans, we can get toxoplasmosis as well. We can be infected by toxo because of our interactions with cats. And if an adult male human has toxo, they are highly attracted to the smell of cat urine.
Huh. And
like for some reason, let's just say there's like a litter box. You're at your friend's house, there's a party, and you're drinking beer or whatever, you're not getting drunk or whatever, but you just really want to stand next to the cat litter box because you're just attracted to that cat urine.
Huh. Now, I don't know this for certain, but I have heard that toxo is potential reason behind that stereotype of the crazy cat lady, so to speak. That because I've heard that in the prey items as well, but also in humans, it causes people to be either have like zero fear or an unusual attraction to any and all things cats.
Yeah, so you do have this because the toxo is kind of causing, at that point, you're the intermediate host, right? You're the mouse. And toxo in a mouse or a rat, it affects the brain. It actually increases a lot of dopamine. So it slows down reaction times. But yes, it also causes that lack of fear and you more willing to take a risk. And so, yes, most people that have, or people that have toxo, there is that whole like, oh, it's, they are more of the cat people type of person. There was a study that in Europe that looked at people in car crashes. The majority of people that caused a car crash, there was a very high percentage of them that they actually had toxo. And so that car crash was caused, again, kind of by this lack of reaction time, right? Because of toxo. And that's its benefit in rat, like making the rat slower so that the cat can consume it and then it's able to reproduce again. And then what was also a study also came out that was really interesting is majority at that point, I think the study came out in the late 1990s, early 2000s, but at that point in time, the world leaders, CEOs of big companies, presidents of whatever, whether it's a company or a country, all that, those that participated in this particular research study, majority of them had toxoplasmosis. And when you think about it, leaders, stockholders, people in the 1%, sometimes they got that because they took some type of risk, whether it's, thinking out of the box, putting your money into something you're not sure, you're just a little bit more willing to be risky. And so, yeah, a lot of the world leaders, they have toxoplasmosis. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah. So for pregnant women, you do get tested because there is a point where toxoplasmosis can cause abortion or, a miscarriage. And so I think it's by the 3rd month or the 2nd trimester, you have to take a toxo test. And honestly, I thought I was going to be positive. And when they told me I was negative, I was really upset because I was like, so you're just saying I'm risky just because? I'm thinking the whole time stuff I do with crocodiles and snakes, I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, it's probably because I have toxoplasmosis. No, I'm just a risky person.
It's my mind, not the worms.
Yeah. I was just like, I remember the nurses, they're like, oh, good, just to let you know, you're negative. And I was like, what?
So, going back to the cannibalism thing.
Yeah.
Something that would be interesting. So I've heard, I've talked about with people before, like why don't animals cannibalize other animals? What would be interesting is to do a study to see if the more social an animal it is, the less likely they are to cannibalize because they need the social aspect. But what would then be interesting to see is if those that are affected by the parasites that cause them to be cannibalized, if they're more likely to cannibalize if they're in a social setting, because like if they're more social, they're going to cannibalize more because there's more of a guaranteed meal because they're around those that are in their social circles as opposed to having to hunt for food, if that makes sense.
No, that absolutely makes sense. Again, hopefully a young scientist is listening and wants to pick this up as a graduate project. No, but yeah, that's really, really interesting. And, it would also, you have some crocodilian species, like going back to crocodiles, some are more gregarious than others. Do you see cannibalism more in the solitary species than the gregarious species? Like, there's all different little questions that you can ask for sure.
Yeah, because just from like noticing what all the croc people I follow on social media and stuff like that, all their posts and all they talk about, it seems like you see a lot more cannibalism among salties than, say, Niles, for example.
Yeah.
And everyone knows Niles are pretty social, and salties are kind of like the big angry Asperger's kid of the saltwater of the crocodile world.
Yeah.
I just ended every Australian ever, but.
And then the other thing is also looking in population. So one thing that I learned quite a few months ago, right? Everyone thinks of gharial, and it's just like, oh my gosh, they're the best parents, you know, and they'll take care of, you know, you have this social structure of cohorts of like up to 3 years, you know, the brothers and sisters of 3 years, kind of also like watching out for the new siblings kind of thing. And in India, in a particular area of India. And so everyone just thinks like gharials are these wonderful parents. But then you have Phoebe, who is studying gharial in Nepal. Yeah. Why can I not think of her last name? Oh my gosh. If you're listening, Phoebe, I'm sorry.
Griffin.
Thank you. And so she was mentioning, because I had reached out to her about something, and she's like, oh no, our gharial are awful parents. Not awful, but they just, it's not what you see in India with the mom, the dad, and the cute babies on top. They're just kind of like, I'll hang around for a couple weeks and then you're on your own, which is like the American crocodile. Kind of hangs out, won't really protect the nest, you know, and after 3 weeks, okay, bye, you know, see you later. That's probably one of the reasons why the American crocodile is not doing so great throughout its range, is just because the parental care is really not there. Especially with an increase of various mesopredators for various reasons. Whereas like crocodile is they're pretty bold. They're protective of their nests, even in urban areas that we've noticed.
Do they have the like American alligators that are lower maternal care or parental care? Do they have larger clutch sizes compared to those that are they about the same?
They're about the same.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Wonder why that would be.
Yeah, the American crocodile is not a great parent. And so there's been a couple of areas where we've come in and taken the babies and put them in better nurseries where they have a higher chance of surviving, you know, against birds and big tarpon and stuff like that, just because, or like even raccoons and other type of terrestrial predators, because they're just like, meh.
That's interesting. I've also heard that about salties as well, that they're nowhere near as good of parents as some other species.
Yeah, I mean, they will protect nests, but again, it could be just due to population, because, you know, some of the morelets that we have gone to investigate nests, you don't really see them. But then in these other areas, the moms are like, they are coming out and they will kill you. And there's a story that Graham Webb from Australia told me years ago, and I don't know how he got onto it, but let's see, how old is his son now, Freddie? Freddie's like, I think he's in his 20s now. But when Freddie was about 3 years old, you know, Graham had gone out to the field, do nest stuff for the salties. And it was just 2 guys that day. So it was Graham and his colleague. And Graham was like, okay, I will be the one to dig up the nest and get all the data on the eggs. Like, you need to watch out on Mama. And they were in a remote area. Well, Mama snuck up, and the guy that was supposed to be looking out for Mama didn't see. And what happened was Graham, you know, he just kind of felt something was behind him, and he heard a little something. He turned around, and there's a 9-foot, I think he said 9-foot salty, 10-foot female salty. And she lunged, and he was able to kind of do a runner sprint a little bit, but she was still able to get his leg and kind of shook it a little bit, but let go, right? Crocodilians, they won't latch. They will let go, because sometimes they just want to do a defense fight. And so he let go. Obviously, his calves all messed up, and he has some trauma of being attacked by this 9-foot female. Well, 3-year-old Freddie thought it would be funny to be the female crocodile. And so Graham was telling me that Freddie like snuck up on him one time and grabbed his calf. And like, this was like, a week or two after he got attacked by this crocodile. I was like, ah! And like it freaked him out. And of course, when a kid does something bad, but it's funny, you shouldn't laugh. But with that reaction, Freddie kept sneaking up to Graham and grabbing his leg. Yeah. I just thought that was a great story when Graham was telling me. I was like, I'm going to be sharing this with all the people because it's just so funny.
Man,
it's really funny.
That's why we need to get Graham on the show sometime.
Yeah.
I had to see. So I accidentally said American alligator before I meant to say American croc. I realized that when you said American croc. But I got to see my first American croc, and probably like a month ago now. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, where at?
Flamingo Bay.
Someone is. Oh, what's his name? Is it Flamingo Bay? There's apparently a really big crocodile.
There's one over. So the ones where you're guaranteed to see them is Flamingo Bay Marina, but there's like a 9-mile lake or something like that. It's not even that big. I don't know why they call it that. But apparently, a guy told me that there's a massive one in there. So maybe that's
the one I'm thinking of. I have heard about Flamingo Bay though, and having some good sized crocs in that area.
Yeah, it was a pretty good size. It was interesting. The tail seems a whole lot longer than like in an alligator.
Oh, interesting.
That could have just been the one that I saw, but it seemed like the body was around the same like size of like a big alligator, but the tail was a little bit longer. So that was pretty interesting. But it was really cool because I got to get like really close to it. It was really cool to get that off my life list, especially because I'm going to Australia soon, and I thought it'd be like a tragedy to see an Australian croc before I saw an American croc. So.
Yeah.
Well, I have heard that like salties, an adaptation for going out to the open ocean, is they have proportionally longer tails than other crocs. So maybe that's something to do with Americans as well, since they're fairly marine species as well.
Yeah, they are a marine species, so that actually could be true. I never thought about that before. That's really interesting.
So, Matt, you have any other parasite-related questions?
Are there are freshwater crocodilians getting parasitized more than saltwater?
I do not know. Just because of some species being more heavily studied than others, you just, like we know a lot about American alligator parasites. We know a lot about the spectacled caiman and their parasites, and the Australian or Indo-Pacific. Like those are really well studied, but to look at difference between those that are more freshwater and those that are more brackish or salt, it's hard to say just because there's just a bias in studies.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, those freshwater, those marine species often go into the freshwater all the time as well. So
yeah, we do see that with our American crocs here.
So, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking. I think it's a dumb question, but
there's no dumb questions.
Well, I was on dumb questions.
I was just thinking, like, so are these parasites, are they susceptible to salt? Like, theoretically, could like a saltwater croc take in salt water like without killing itself to kill some of the parasites within it?
No, but if they had, let's say, had ticks or leeches from a freshwater environment, going into the salt water would kill off the ectoparasite.
Yeah, I've heard that. I wasn't sure if they could.
Not the internal.
Okay, interesting. No, I think I'm out of parasite questions now.
Okay, so shift gear. Since we last talked, has there been any new developments and research with CRC in general, or?
When did we last talk?
I think it was September last year.
When was it?
I think it was like September, something like that.
Let's see. We started studying green iguanas on the peninsula.
That's cool.
It's funny. Myself and two other researchers participated in the IUCN Iguana Specialist Group conference in November, like virtually. And almost everyone was talking about, oh, green iguanas being invasive. And there's so many and they're overtaking the native species. And here in Belize, we're like, they're like endangered here. It's just so funny because like we want to get numbers higher and protect them, and everyone's trying to rid of them, and it's just like, bring them to Belize, like bring them to their native range. Like there hasn't been any good population studies, at least in Belize, and even talking to some other people of the green iguana throughout its native range, like in certain areas, but because of illegal hunting, especially around Easter, because people do consume them, loss of habitat. I mean, they're not doing so well here, but yeah, so we started the green iguana surveys. We're continuing our American crocodile population survey, and what was fantastic or really exciting was the last 3 weeks I had my colleague Matt Sparks here, and he's the one that helped us initiate all our drone surveys of the manatee and crocodiles in Placencia Lagoon, where CRC is based. And he brought a thermal drone, not let me put a thermal camera on the drone or a filter or whatever, like a thermal drone. And so we were troubleshooting this and to see if we're able to find crocs day and night, and we are. The crocodiles day and night, their temperature just seems to vary differently from the external environments. Whereas, like, for example, the manatee, we couldn't pick up the manatee during the day. We were only able to pick it up at night. So that was something that was really interesting between mammal versus crocodilian. And so one of the reasons with the thermal drones that would be really good is just that, especially as you move forward with studying very shy or cryptic species, is that they might hear the boat and go down somewhere or go into a lagoon that you can't get to through boat, kayak, or even by foot. And so by utilizing the thermal drone, we're able to possibly increase our precision when it comes to understanding what the population is in a particular area. And then also kind of seeing that, are these crocodiles congregating in a particular area that we can't get to, which then is important for conservation reasons. And then just looking at behavior, from my old students' behavior studies, we know that the crocodiles are, at least here in Belize, their courtship during breeding season happens at night. So we could use a thermal drone to possibly observe the courtship that is happening here in the wilds. So it was just a lot of troubleshooting. It was funny. We took out the thermal drone to this one area off in the Keys in Belize. At Turnip Atoll, there hadn't been studies there, any croc studies done for over a decade. Some areas even for like 20 years. And so Matt's flying the drone, he takes it off, and I see a bunch of birds, and it's just like, okay, I'm observing, I'll let him know if he needs to bring it back down. I'm seeing these grackles, there was a frigate bird, and I bent down, I'm like, everything's fine. I bent down to get my water bottle, all of a sudden I hear Matt go, oh God, something just hit it, and I was like, shit. And you just see the thermal going, like flying all crazy and stuff, and then it just crashes into the mangrove. And I was like, oh, how are we going to get this back? I don't know how, but one of the rangers that we were with from TASA found the drone, missing a propeller. It was underwater. We were able to fly it again.
Wow.
2 days.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was an indestructible. It's a drone it's a Parrot drone. It's a company from France. Apparently they make these indestructible drones. But that was pretty awesome. So he left, but we're hoping whenever he comes back next year, he can stay a little bit longer and we can start doing some more thermal stuff. And then also for the last couple of years, we haven't really focused on nest ecology, but I'm starting to realize how important that is for future conservation management plans. So this year, along with a researcher, Everett Madsen, we are looking at how nest substrates can affect the microclimate within nests, thus possibly affecting the sex ratio in nests. So we put data loggers in some of the crocodile nests from the past few weeks to monitor temperature and humidity. And one thing that's unique here in Belize, and I'm sure it happens in other places throughout its range, but we have found American crocodiles nesting in clay, nesting in, trash, soil, and then you have the historical sandy beaches. And so we want to put the data loggers and the various substrates just to kind of see how the substrates may vary, again, in humidity and temperature. And I don't know, does one substrate kind of assist in increasing the incubation time so the hatchlings aren't in a nest as long as we historically know? We don't know. So this year's a preliminary survey, and we'll kind of smooth out any kinks, and then next year we're hoping to deploy more data loggers in nest.
It'll also be interesting to see if the difference between those incubation substrates have anything to do with potentially like fertility or predation rates or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have a lot of questions. We've teamed up with another NGO here in Belize, TASA, who they help manage one of the furthest keys in Belize. So they're super excited about this. And yeah, so we're really excited. Like I said, this year's more of like a prelim survey, just kind of, smoothing out all the kinks. And we know where some nests are, but it does seem like, at least down here, the American crocs may be nesting later than usual, and I don't know why. Climate change, most likely.
All right, so we had on a guy who's he works with the Blue Iguana Conservation Project.
Yeah, Luke Harding.
Yeah, and
Who's that?
Luke Harding.
Okay, yes. I know who he is.
He was saying that the green iguanas are invasive over the Grand Cayman Islands too, and that they're spreading a lot of parasites, or maybe it's just viruses. I think it's just viruses over to the blue iguanas, and that was a problem over there. Have you seen any green iguanas passing any viruses over to the to the crocodilians over there? I imagine they're probably, since they're native, they probably don't.
Yeah. Nothing. We're not seeing anything here in regards of like invasive parasites, or we don't really have invasive species here in Belize. I mean, red ear sliders, but they're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Other than that, and I think part of it is illegal to have any wildlife as pets, even our native. And so with that, people aren't importing anything in and then letting it go. And even though we're surrounded by Guatemala and Mexico, we have rivers. We just don't really have invasive species here.
Is the no pet thing? Is that because of to prevent invasive?
Honestly, it's a little bit part of culture. Belizeans are the Belizean culture is very big about wildlife should be in the wild. Even though, we do know Maya culture, the aristocrats, the kings and queens, they would have wildlife as pets. But overall, it is wildlife should be in the wild. It's and then I think another piece of that goes back to colonization, in regards of back in the day when Belize was just a British colony. You had a bunch of people taking animals and then taking them to England or the US or whatever. So when Belize got their independence, they said, you are not exploiting us anymore. Our wildlife is staying here. Nobody is taking them. And kind of with that, it was just, I think because Belize is not very developed as well, people are just so used to just, why do I need to have a pet parrot, a pet monkey when they're literally in the tree right here?
Yeah.
And it's great. I get to experience them and I don't have to worry about feeding them, taking them to the vet and all this other stuff. They're literally right there. So what's the point having it as a pet? And I think that's the beauty of Belize, is that it is, because it's not very developed. I had a student from Europe one time come, and he had mentioned the reason why, in Europe, like, because he was mentioning a lot of people have snakes and venomous snakes, and he's just like, we've destroyed our nature. The only way for us to experience nature is to have them as pets, and so, and that was, I always thought that was really, really interesting, is that because in certain areas and cities or more developed countries, you don't have nature around you anymore. So yeah, the only way, and you have that deep innate urge to be part of nature, and like the only way to do that is in a sense to have the pets. I just always thought that was really interesting, that of what he had mentioned. But like I said, here in Belize, it's like, I have yellowhead parrots, I have green iguana, tenosaur, yellowhead parrots, red lord parrots, coati, boas, racers, all this just in my yard. Like, that's in my yard. I have manatee coming up in the canal. I have crocodiles coming in the canal. So I'm like, yeah, why do I need a pet? It's literally right here.
It's one less mouth to feed too.
Yes. One less mouth to feed, I mean, if anything, it's just, I have a couple of bird baths per se, lizard baths, water and stuff. My compost is just right outside, so if someone needs a snack or whatever, but I get to see the beauty, but I don't have to worry about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's cool. It's very, yeah, that is neat. That would be, I guess, the ultimate goal, is to get more urbanized cities more integrated. They're doing a lot of that stuff, like covering buildings with like plants and stuff. Like the entire building's like a plant. It's like crazy.
Yeah, I've been seeing more and more of that, and it's supposed to be. I mean, how many studies have come out saying, going for a walk in a forest, even 20 minutes, does so much for your mental state, even subconsciously. And it is because we are a part of nature. We have just evolved so quickly out of it because of technology and just society. But there is that part of us that we want to be part of it. And so I think that's why there are so many cities, and I know Europe has really been spearheading this, but trying to create these green spaces, for mental and physical health of people.
Well, even so I'm super, like, I'm literally like always outside. I hate being inside. And I even do like kayak tours a lot and stuff, where I'm always outside in mangrove tunnels and stuff like that, and showing people. Even like during busy season, where I'm going back to back constantly doing all this kind of stuff, I got, the wind was too high and I got a couple of days off, and I went into the Everglades, and I was still kayaking. I still did the same exact thing that I was already doing, but it was just, it was like a refresh to me, just being able to be out. I don't know. I never, that's a good way to articulate it, because I never know how to describe it to people. It's whenever I describe it, it sounds super hippie. Like, I always tell them it's like restorative to the soul. When I go into the Everglades, it's just like, I feel so much better. I don't know how to describe it, but anyways, that's a really good, like, we want to be in nature, even when I'm outside a lot, just being able to be by yourself in nature and just sit there. It's so rejuvenating.
Yeah. And like I said, so many studies have come out about the benefits physically and especially mentally. And Japan is another country that has been really spearheading and changing a lot of their urban areas and trying to get green back, and then that brings back wildlife, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cool. The other problem you would have with that is the reason why I feel like a lot of this urbanization happened to begin with. Some sort of negative thing happens with an animal and a human, and humans just try and separate themselves from it, and then you get to where we are now and stuff. You'd have to change the mindset in humans of like, it's, it happened with, like, obviously you don't want it to happen, but it,
Yeah, it's education. Education is so big. And I mean, with here in the CRC and Placencia Lagoon, unfortunately, Placencia is becoming a big destination for retired expats. And I know people in Florida complain about this all the time. You have these Yankees coming to Florida, and they love Florida, but they don't want any of the wildlife. I mean, that's kind of what's happening here. And so it's just kind of really educating these people. And especially when you come to a foreign country, it's just like, don't try to gentrify the culture here.
Yeah.
You're not going to get, I have had a couple of Floridians. I have a crocodile in the canal. Can you remove it? And I said, what is it doing? Oh, it's just swimming. I'm like, this ain't Florida. No, we're not. Like here, you're going to have to learn how to coexist. If you don't want this crocodile here, because guess what? Everyone else in your neighborhood loves Jeff. You're going to have to move. And I was like, and if you want the whole neighborhood to hate you moving Jeff, you're not going to have a fun time living here anymore. Like, cause I mean, that's just how it is. And so
like when I do these kayak tours in the side, you'll be surprised. You get these people that come in that are like, that, are there gators, and they don't want to see gators and all this stuff. And I'm like, but that's cool. Like, why? Yeah. Like, there aren't any where we do it. But I was like, why wouldn't you want to see it? Like, it's just like, I always encourage people to go down kayaking down Turner River in the Everglades, because you can kayak past a bunch of gators, and it's really cool to see. And they're all like, I think your idea of fun and cool is different from mine. I'm just like, why wouldn't that be cool to be able to kayak right next to a gator? It's not going to do anything. It just sits there.
But then those same people are going to head to Australia or Central America and then pay for a tour to come see crocodiles, because it's really cool to see reptilian.
Exactly. Exactly. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I would like to have a neighborhood crocodile named Jeff.
Yeah. It's getting to the hour where the creatures start coming out. So I don't know if you guys can hear my dogs, but it's because it's
wildlife.
It's dusk. It's the time for the wildlife to come out. But yeah, we've done a really big, I mean, for me, the outreach has to be continuous. I never, when we started the CRC, I was like, we're not going to school once a year or every other year. Cause I remember being in school, and maybe, I think we went to the LA Zoo once, maybe had someone come by to do a wildlife show once or twice throughout my 8 years at this elementary/junior high school. And if you don't just innately love wildlife, all the information they provide you is going to go one ear and out the other, And so that's why, like, with us, with the kids, and then even just like Facebook's really huge here in Belize. And so with the local Facebook pages, we are constantly posting, whether it's like what we're doing for research or some type of educational thing, just so it's just even subconsciously getting into people's mind about how to coexist. These are not your man-eating species, blah, 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 blah. And like overall, I'm not saying it's 100% perfect, especially with so many people moving in. I feel like some days I feel like we're back to square one. But it's just the constant. And overall, I mean, again, Jeff was like a 7.5, 8 foot crocodile, and everyone was like super cool with him. And we've had some other crocodiles, like at some of the hotels, they're like, oh no, they're fine. Like people have learned how to coexist with them, but it's just that constant pounding of education. And like, the other thing that I learned too is, because I've seen some other people, they're like, oh, we got to really create signs. Signs are good. Oh, we got to make pamphlets, and we got to do these type of posters, and we're going to be passing it out. You know what? Guess what? majority of the time you're going to be wasting paper. Like,
no one's gonna read it.
no one's going to read it. Do not waste, we do have some pamphlets and we give it to those people. You can tell the ones that they'll read something, we just don't go out and just pass it, like knock on someone's door and pass something to them. Because the majority of those people are going to just toss it out. So we do have stuff for those that are truly interested and they're going to read. But overall, the best thing is just face to face and have a conversation. Like that is the majority of our outreach. I do not rely on pamphlets, posters, or signs because it is, if just looking at all the different types of outreach or education that I've seen all over the world and people still struggling in some areas and just kind of really why are you still struggling after so many years of getting this community to be behind you, and again, it's just there's that lack of building a relationship with the community, and then just also again just really not having face-to-face conversations and not being continuous with the education. And so by learning, I hate to say it, by learning by others' mistakes, or I don't want to say complete failures. It's not a complete failure, but just I would say the slow progress. I've just picked up on some of that stuff, and it's like, okay, this is what we're not going to do. And I feel that has really spearheaded our overall croc-wise community here in Placencia Lagoon.
So when I do these kayak tours, one thing that I've noticed is like if you're, especially when I'm talking about either, because the two biggest things are either gators or shark. People are asking about that. And I found like if you're super passionate about explaining to them and why you're not going to just get attacked randomly by a shark or an alligator, when you're super passionate about that, they're more likely to not only listen, but actually believe you, yes. Which I think is why Steve Irwin was so effective at getting people into the herp world and stuff, is because he's so passionate and people are like, well, this is, I believe him. They're harmless. This is cool, and stuff. I told a guy today because he's asking about shark and stuff, and he had a daughter with him, and she was like freaking out. And I told her, I said, why don't you want to eat your paddle right now? And she's like, I was like, because you don't recognize it as food, do you? Like, a shark doesn't recognize you as food either. It doesn't want to eat you. It's the same exact thing. It's the same reason why you don't want to eat your paddle right now.
Yeah. No, that's actually a great analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so anyways, I that's something I've been the kayak tours have been really good to add on because there's a lot of interpreting and education work with that stuff, and it's helped me like with figuring out how to explain that to people and getting them to listen and understand it too, because it's not even like some people just don't listen, and the ones that listen aren't going to retain. So you got to make it so that they listen to you, but then they also retain the information and believe it, So.
And that's the other thing is that when I was living in LA, I was working at a wildlife sanctuary, and they tell you what to say, and you just constantly repeat the education. And it was always about why these animals are so important for the environment. And one thing I've learned here, some people don't care if they're eco-engineers or, they help their crocodiles eat the diseased fish. Some people do not care. So if you just only speak about that, you're not going to get the support. There's some people that are like, oh, this could be good for tourism. I'm listening, because they want money or for other reasons. And then one of the things that I feel that has really hit home is we talk about the importance these animals are to the culture of beliefs. And you can find the ties of crocodiles with the ancient Maya civilization. You can find stories with the local Creole and even the Garifuna. And so one thing is that, if we lose crocodiles, we lose a bit of our culture. We lose a bit of who we are. No matter how much money you have, no matter what your education is, people are proud of their culture, and no one wants to lose their culture. And so that is how we have really hooked people in, is by talking about the cultural aspects. Imagine if the bald eagle went extinct in the US. People would be like, oh my God, like that's losing a bit of the American culture. And so that if I feel like if anything now, we talk more about the cultural importance of crocodiles. And again, that has, and it, I had this one intern, he's like, oh, you're tricking people. I'm like, I am not tricking people. I'm not making up stories. What I'm doing is the reverence that the ancient civilizations or people had up to the 1800s. Like all this got lost through colonization. All we're doing is, in a sense, finding out the facts that have been muddled down by the English. Because if you want to exploit a resource, the best way to exploit a resource is to make people not care about that resource, whether that's habitat, whether that's wildlife, whether that's people. And so the thing is that you saw here in Belize that there was this disconnect you started losing this disconnect with nature because the British were pushing Belizeans aside. You can no longer have any control over your habitat or over your wildlife. This is ours. And so by just that disconnect, people lost, oral stories. And again, this kind of respect or this knowledge of how to coexist with wildlife. And so all we're doing is providing, we've dug up these old stories and this education, and we're just kind of providing what's been lost. And so, but again, it is something that I have seen, and so I will use it more. But by connecting culture with wildlife, that seems to get people's attention and wanting to take positive action for local wildlife.
It's kind of like how, well, that in it kind of goes, it's a little bit different, but it kind of goes along that thread, but just making it about them as opposed to like you should save this crocodile because it's a crocodile. But like for instance, I feel like that's why they still, for some reason, teach that we breathe air from trees, when we don't, and so I feel like it's because people will care more about trees if we need them to breathe as opposed to they're important for habitat and other things, So, but yeah. Did you have something to say, Nate?
Nope.
Oh, I thought you. I thought you had a question. But yeah. Anyways, that's the other thing is like making it about their culture, just making it about them. Like people care when it's about them as opposed to
exactly. People care when you don't have. I feel, especially in this world where it's now about being a social media superstar or having the fancy clothes or going to the Hollywood parties or, I feel a lot of society is a bit selfish per se. You have a lot of indigenous cultures where it's more of a community aspect, but that is being lost due to modernization and technology and all that kind of stuff. It's the community mindset is being lost, and it's more of the me and the selfishness. And so, but yeah, in regards of that, by trying to educate people about conservation and having that connection to them, I mean, that's what's gonna get people's attention per se.
Yeah, for sure. It's that's why I like to tell people. I feel like conservation's the hardest, and maybe I'm biased, but the hardest field of science. Because it's a fine line.
You have to wear so many hats.
But yeah, it's a fine line between conserving wildlife and dealing with humans.
Yeah, so. Right? Like I'm an extrovert. I really am an extrovert. I have my moments of being an introvert, and I feel like that's happened the more and more I've gotten into conservation, because for all those that want to get into conservation, guess what? You better be ready to interact with people, because there's a lot of interaction with people. So if you really don't like people, or you're like, I just only want to work with wildlife and animals, don't get into conservation.
Yeah, get into the research, You don't have to more of the lab stuff. You'll never have to talk to anyone.
Exactly.
That's what the mosquito research that I do. It's 8 hours in the lab by yourself. It's brutal, but it's nice to balance it with the kayaks. Then you get to talk to people all the time.
Yeah.
I take people that just don't talk. I had these people that just didn't talk, didn't ask any questions, had no reactions to anything I told them or showed them. I even had a Cassiopeia, an upside down jellyfish, but I had to like dive in the water to get it to show them. So I like dive underwater, grab it, pull it up. Most people just in general like ooh and ah at an upside down jellyfish. And the fact that I had to dive underwater and pick it up and show them, they were just completely stone faced, didn't say a word, no reaction, nothing. I'm just like, what am I supposed to do here?
I've for various reasons I've had to deal with people like that, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna entertain myself now. It's fine.
It's just like, I don't know. I feel like they've got to be. I feel like in general, people are very interesting. If you can figure out how to talk to someone, most people are very interesting. But people like that, I don't understand. They've got it. I don't know. They've got to be just so boring. Like, what could possibly make you interested in things? So I don't know. But it's just funny. People are weird.
Can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah. But I guess that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
All right, Nate, did you have any other questions?
Nope.
Cool. Well, is there anything that you wanted to end with?
Nope.
No. Well, I was talking to Marisa, but
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot, and we went into the parasite stuff. I guess if anything, just look out in the next year when we publish the paper about Ricky Bobby and how the parasites led to that croc's metabolic bone disease. So talking with people, that's a first, and it really has gotten people to start thinking about maybe some metabolic bone disease they've seen in captive animals was not caused due to poor husbandry or anything like that. It was they had parasites, but nobody was looking for it. So it's really interesting.
You know what? Actually, I just made this connection that you just said that. When reptiles get prolapsed colons, it can be caused from impaction or a parasite. But I've also read that it can be caused from metabolic bone disease. But maybe the metabolic bone disease
is caused by those parasites.
Caused by the parasites that's causing the prolapsed colon. That's super interesting. Yeah. Huh. That's super interesting. I wonder, have there been any studies at all into that with reptiles?
No, I don't think so.
Wow. That's super interesting.
Yeah. A lot of people don't think about parasites, and they're fascinating little creatures. There's like, oh my God, there's a world of studies that can be done. And if anyone, again, any young scientists out there is like looking to get their name out in the research world, doing something with parasites most likely will get you there. It's a field that really hasn't been touched, but people are starting to understand the importance of parasites for various reasons, even in the ecosystem, how they have an important role in ecosystem dynamics. So they are starting to get their due diligence and time in the lights right now.
Cool. I guess it's kind of like when they started to realize venom had uses for medicinal uses rather than just making anti-venom and stuff, and that exploded. Now there's all this research into venom and stuff, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, not a problem. Happy to come on any other time if you guys see or hear anything interesting with the CRC, what we're doing. Happy to discuss it.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.